5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to Relentless. This is the show for high performers who are driven and committed to being at their best. Nick Peterson and Jonathan Montgomery, co-founders of Relentless Dietetics, are your hosts.
Welcome to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Nick Peterson, hanging out today with Jonathan Montgomery.
What is up?
And the Dr. Trevor Cashy.
Hello.
Jonathan, obviously, super active on social media. You'll see him on a lot of my stuff. We go back and forth a lot. We agree and disagree openly. It's a lot of fun. Dr. Cashy you'll see too, but you'll see him as Dr. Cashy. You'll see him as T. You'll see him as Trevor Cashy. In the armpit of Russia, they called him Jack. So, Trevor, Dr. Cashy, for the sake of congruency and the rest of this podcast, what do you prefer? What shall we call you?
Okay, so I think Trevor is perfectly fine. If you introduce yourself as Dr. Peterson, I will introduce myself as Dr. Cashy.
This is going to be a tough habit to break. It's going to be hard for me to not to call you doctor, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, if you call yourself Mr. Montgomery, I'll be Dr. Cashy. If you call yourself Jonathan, I'll call myself Trevor.
I can.
How about posturing, right? Yeah.
Alternatively, we can all just be doctors. So we'll play that by ear. So if you hear Trevor, we're talking about Dr. Cashy. He is a PhD in metabolic chemistry, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what is this podcast all about? This is our first episode, and we are simply going to talk about cultivating the highest quality of life by getting a little bit better every day. Identifying and putting into action the little things that are pretty much going to make you awesome. And being unyielding in the commitment to doing so, hence the name Relentless. They are also recorded in a very specific order, and we'll explain why that's important in a later episode. But today we're going to talk about the single biggest leverage concept when I talk to people that is that we feel is holding people back from their greatness. And that is the fact that when they're trying to figure something out, whatever you think is going to make your life better, you're going to the internet, you're going to coaches, Instagram coaches, you're going to your hairdresser. Your hairdresser might be your Instagram coach. Wherever you're going, you're looking for an answer. And what a lot of people don't realize is they're not finding their answers because they are asking the wrong questions. And when it comes to getting answers and their subsequent solutions, which is ultimately what people are looking for, right? A solution to something. The quality of the questions is paramount. And you're not going to get answers and their subsequent solutions to questions you do not ask.
On the opposite end of this spectrum lies the equally frustrating, if not more devastating problem of asking the wrong questions. You know, whether it's the right question at the wrong time or the wrong question altogether. Wrong for you it's just that it's wrong. The answer to a wrong question, no matter how correct it may be, is simply not going to help you achieve the result you're after. You know, it's the old garbage in, garbage out paradigm.
Anyone that's believable, like Dr. Cashy here, who is the person I believe with most things, is going to answer the question you ask. So, like Jonathan just said, you ask the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer, and you're going to come up with the wrong solution. I think the person that has probably helped me the most in this aspect and subsequently improve the quality of my life all around is Trevor here. See, I almost just called him Dr. Cashy again. And Jonathan, you've known Trevor about as long as I have, and when you met him, did you have this maddening circle of asking him a question and then him saying, "What do you mean?" and then ask another question, and you just get stuck in this loop, and you start realizing that your questions suck?
You know, at first, maddening is a good word for it, man. It was an absolutely maddening experience. What do you mean by that? Or, I don't know what you're asking. Can you clarify? Or the absolute worst for me was, well, is that what you really want to do? You know, and you're trying to get an answer, and you realize that you know, it's you're not getting what you're looking for. You know, at the end of the day, when you finally realize that getting an actual answer, you know, one that's actionable, applicable and appropriate to elicit the response you're after, it starts from asking the proper question. The value of that search for clarity starts to shine through. And, the amount of thought and introspection required to determine what it is you really want to know, it kind of turns out to be a really small price to pay for the return on that investment. And so as frustrating it was for me at first to get the Dr. Kashey or the Trevor interrogation, really the benefits, they've been tremendous, and not just with, food or training, which is what we started talking about, but with all facets of my life. So it really was a maddening experience that turned out to be probably one of the best things for me.
Absolutely. Same boat. I could tell you that it's Trevor that got me to make this paradigm shift from coming up with a question one day and then spending the next 2 weeks trying to get an answer. Now I'm going to spend 2 weeks like cultivating the appropriate question and spend a day trying to get the answer. And that's going to end a lot better. That's a much better use of my 2 weeks. And that's really something that I've learned about that. And I'm curious if Trevor has anything to add about asking the right questions, or Trevor, do you have this, do you get that experience where people are taken aback when they come to you because you have all the answers, being a PhD and a scientist? Do people get taken aback when you don't just tell them, like, here's how you solve your life?
Absolutely. So I was in an academic environment almost my entire life, and I first figured out how annoying this could be to people when actually I was deposed by some lawyers for this. I was involved in this court battle between some supplement companies and business practice and all this other crap, and I was taken in as a subject matter expert. And basically, when you are deposed by a lawyer, they ask you a bunch of questions that don't really mean anything, trying to get you to say something they want you to say to try and corner you later. The stenographer was there, I think that's what they're called, or they're recording everything by hand. And when the lawyer asks you something and you answer, when anybody says anything at all, the stenographer records it. And at the end of the deposition, which was like 3 or 4 hours long, the stenographer was done, and a couple weeks later, I got the transcript of the conversation, and there's an index, right, where you can look in the back, and then it tells you, the most commonly said things, what pages they were on, and how many times they were said. And I had some variation of, I don't understand the question, or can you repeat the question, over 400 times.
Oh, man.
So you're talking like almost once per minute. I asked the lawyer to rephrase the question. Whether I knew or not didn't really matter, because I didn't really know what the lawyer was trying to ask. I don't treat everybody like a lawyer, but that was something where I couldn't help but just laugh out loud when I saw how ridiculous that must have been. And I understand why somebody asked me if I had been deposed by a lawyer before. But I had learned this from my old boss when I worked in a lab, to really frame your question, right? Do you know what you want to ask ahead of time? Or is this something that you're just kind of rattling off a question because you don't know and you haven't taken the time to try and find an answer yourself? What energy have you put into this question before asking? Because Google is also very good at answering the question that you ask, right? If you ask Google, what is the best brush? Google will tell you, I don't freaking know. Are you talking about shrubbery? Are you talking about brushing your teeth? Are you talking about brushing your hair? So a little bit of thought into the question ahead of time, where you frame the question, helps you articulate the question. And articulation is just a matter of am I using words that are higher than a second grade level? And it helps make things specific. That's different from context, but basically, the longer your question is, the better of an answer you can get. So instead of what is the best brush, it is what is the best brush to brush my hair. Okay, and even that isn't a lot of context, but you're still articulating well enough. So if you frame the question and then you articulate it, make it a little bit longer, get a little bit more specific, and after you articulate it, you can add some context. So here is, you have a hairbrush, but I want to use a hairbrush after I get out of the pool. Okay, so now you've put a little bit of thought into the question. I've looked up what sort of brushes I need. I still have no idea. I know I need a brush. I know I need a brush for my hair, but now I know I need a brush for my hair after I get out of the pool. So you have framed the question, you've articulated it, you've added some context, and the last part is to keep an open mind, because a lot of people will ask loaded questions where you may read something and then ask somebody else who may know about the subject matter, expecting them to answer the way your original source had told you what it was about, if that makes sense. So if you read something about men over 40 need to do this to be this healthy under these conditions, which, does fulfill most of the criteria for asking a good question, you can then go ask a subject matter expert, and they're probably not going to give you the same answer that you read in whatever blog website that you've consumed. And then you have to be able to sit back and compare the answer you've gotten from a subject matter expert to non-subject matter experts, or even between subject matter experts. And this is where things can get a bit funky, because anybody who has studied anything is doing you a disservice by trying to read between your lines. And that's why I'm really annoying with, I don't know, it depends, or what are you trying to ask me?
If you're ready to get the body you desire without depriving yourself of the foods you enjoy, download your free diet playbook now at www.relentlesspodcast.com.
Well, that kind of leads perfectly into one of the things that I'm sure Jonathan deals with all the time, and he probably learned how to deal with it from you, Trevor, is the number of people that have run through the nutrition process, the RD process, is astronomical. It's definitely in the thousands. And when I talk to people, that's kind of the issue. People are reading stuff. They're going up to their coach. They're asking the wrong questions. And then that so-called expert, with air quotes, is not asking questions about their question. And I'm curious if that's something that, Jonathan, you run into. Are people just asking the wrong questions, or do they have coaches that aren't asking questions? Like, what's you spend all day helping people with this stuff?
I mean, it's true. It's pretty pervasive out there. There seems to be this common theme out there among many coaches and fitness professionals that, information is the answer and it's what people need. So, there's massive amounts of content out there from blogs and podcasts and articles and everything, providing tons of information, but absolutely no context on how to use it or any clarity on how to act on it. And, furthermore, it's offered as a solution without first defining the problem and without asking any questions. And as Dr. Cashy just pointed out, two things stood out to me. One, asking a question, looking for an answer is not the best way to go about it. Confirmation bias will never really get you a true answer. And number two, I am really glad I do not have to brush my hair, because that is a lot of work and a lot of effort out there. And he just kind of really exposed an industry I'm not really aware of. But circling back, I understand the desire to help people. I get it. That's what we all want to do. But to do that, you really have to first get to know a person. Anyone that says they can solve your problem and offer you a custom solution without getting to know you is someone I would be highly skeptical of. I know I couldn't do it. I'm not even sure T could do it. You really got to know somebody. And to do that, you have to ask questions to really help somebody. You have to find out where they're at, what their background is, what their desires are, what they're even capable of. And you do that by asking questions. You don't do it by attempting to impress people with a shocking and awe display of terminology or an information dump to show how knowledgeable you are. It's not really how we do things. If you want to know science, great. Become a scientist. I know a guy who can help you with some direction. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, do you really want to know how the pancreas works? Or do you want to perform better and look good naked? And those are two totally different questions and are going to get you two totally different answers. And I think a lot of fitness pros kind of confuse those two and try to tell people more about the pancreas and less about how to actually take action to get a result.
Yeah, I could tell you that I have seen somebody, Jonathan was actually there. We were on a podcast one time, and I have seen somebody ask Trevor the wrong question. And I think Jonathan and I both ducked for cover, waiting for his head to explode. Without getting too much into it, what did she ask? Something about what is protein?
Oh, yeah.
I
don't know if I could even tell this.
I'll tell you this, man. Asking the wrong question can absolutely be disastrous. But in this instance, it was actually kind of hilarious. We were on a podcast, and Trevor was literally asked something like, "What is protein?" or "What is protein for?" Something along those lines with absolutely zero follow-up or context. And sitting right next to him in the studio, it's like I could literally see his head about to explode from trying to distill a decade of information on the subject from a damn near atomic level into a soundbite. And Nick, you and I just kind of looked at each other and like braced for impact. While I am 100% positive everyone learned a little bit more about protein than they bargained for that day, it probably wasn't the answer they were after. And I mean, literally, how do you expect a PhD to put everything he knows about a subject into an actionable bit of information like what is a protein? I don't understand.
Trevor's like curled up in a ball right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, I remember like explaining what a protein was, and then during the break, I got flack from pretty much everybody because I basically gave the distilled answer of what a protein was. And I remember getting a message like from my mother or something that was like, "You should have just said chicken." Like, but you asked me what a protein was, and I had a very hard time. That 3-second pause for me felt like 45 minutes.
It looked like 45 minutes. It was 45 minutes for us too.
Yeah. I just literally wanted to kind of what's the drill for air raid where you duck under the table and put your head between your knees? That's kind of how I felt.
That's what happens. You ask an expert like Trevor. I almost said Dr. Cashy again. An expert like Dr. Trevor he's going to answer the question you ask. And it's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time, right? So Trevor came down to Vero Beach, and we opened RD, and together you guys developed a system to train both how we handle our members and how the staff has to handle members, because they're not you and they're not Trevor. I know they ask a lot of questions, and how do you get a whole team of people asking the right questions?
Man, I think you kind of nailed it right there. I think the fact that we simply take a member-centered approach as opposed to a coach-centered approach is a big thing here with that. We understand that what we know, what we do, and what works for us is not necessarily going to work for you because you're not us. You don't have our background. You're not where we're at. But we also know that you really could care less about the results we have achieved for ourselves. And rightly so. You need to stay concerned with your progress and your success. And this is why we always start with questions, to find out what that means to you. We ask questions because, to be frank, we actually care a lot about the actual result. We care about what you're hoping to achieve and accomplish, not just what you think we want to hear. What you say is not always what you want, and what you want isn't necessarily what you think it is. And this is why we dig. It's not about what we want. I don't care about getting a great before and after shot. I'm not nearly concerned as your abs as we are with your quality of life. And the only way we can improve that is by finding out what you value and what you want to achieve. And one of the ways we've come up to do this is basically, we get a little role playing in, we get a little scenario in. If I had you close your eyes and think about this, if I waved a magic wand, we issue those here at RD, and you suddenly were able to overnight achieve all your goals, what happened? What changed for you, and how do you know it occurred? If when you open your eyes, the only answer you could come up with involved in a decrease in the end result of some Newtonian gravitational force calculation, then I guess congrats, the scale means that much to you. But if instead, when you open your eyes, you say, you know what, I look good on camera for my next webinar, or I feel extremely confident going to interview for a promotion, I can go up a flight of stairs without getting winded, or take my kids to Disney, or go to the beach and take my shirt off with my family and not feel embarrassed about it. I finally feel good about myself after years of being tormented in grade school. Well, guess what? We're finding some root causes that you're looking to change, and not just the superficial things you're attributing it to. And that takes a lot of digging and a lot of asking, because only you know the answer to that. It doesn't matter if I project that you need to do X, Y, or Z. What really matters is what you're looking to change. And I think the inquisitive nature that Dr. Cashy's had, or that Trevor's established or developed through his academic pursuits, we can really translate that to a personal pursuit. And I think that's what we've been able to kind of, encourage our team to do as well.
So basically, when somebody says, I want to lose 20 pounds, how do I do that? They're really asking, how do I feel good about myself at the pool with my kids? Or how do I launch my business, without feeling self-conscious about speaking publicly? And then if you ask questions to get them to ask the right question, we can actually help them.
Yeah, absolutely. We simply don't know what you want until you know what you want. And sometimes that takes answering some hard questions. The 5 whys, peel it back. Tim Ferriss will always say, everybody says they want $1 million. Do you want 7 zeros in the bank, or do you want the lifestyle you think that provides? I think asking questions to figure out what you're truly after is really the only way anyone can help you with direction.
Trevor, I got a question for you. Am I accurate in saying that your criteria for good questions is frame, articulate, context, and keep an open mind? So the acronym would be FAC.
Yeah, so you got to FAC with me to get this to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So FAC.
That is correct.
Now, the questions will change over time. So you have to know where you are in the journey. You still have to frame and articulate. The context will probably change. Again, the questions that you ask at this level will not be the same ones you need to ask at the next level. The questions you're asking are definitely not the same ones that Trevor needs to be asking. So it's asking the right thing at the right time, and that's thinking in sequence. It's working in sequence, and we'll talk about sequential thinking next time. Just identifying the right questions and being able to ask the right questions at the right time to come up with a solution with whatever is at hand at the time. That's all the time we have, it looks like, for this one. Anything else from you guys?
That's
Thanks
it, man.
for with me.
I got nothing, man. He just fucking ruined it for me.
Yeah. Just remember that, FAC. Good questions. Good questions. Yeah, next time we'll talk about thinking in sequence, and we'll see y'all then.
You've been listening to the Relentless Podcast. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to keep getting a little bit better every day, do us a favor, head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave us an honest review, and be sure not to miss the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.